At 1400 hours on January 26, 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy stood in frozen mud at the edge of the Bois de Riedveer, watching 6 German tanks emerge from Holzwihr through his binoculars. Behind those tanks, 250 white-clad German infantry advanced across snow-covered fields. 19 years old, 2 Silver Stars, the Distinguished Service Cross, every officer in Company B dead or wounded except him. He had maybe 90 seconds to call in artillery before those tanks rolled over his position. Standard doctrine said withdraw, regroup, live to fight another day. Murphy picked up his field telephone instead. 3 days earlier, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, had 120 men. Now Murphy commanded 40 exhausted soldiers, 2 M10 tank destroyers, and a stretch of frozen woods that stood between the German 2nd Mountain Division and a vital roadway leading deep into American lines. The temperature was minus 20 degrees Celsius. The ground was frozen solid. You couldn't dig a foxhole if your life depended on it, and Murphy's life definitely depended on it. The 3rd Infantry Division called themselves the Rock of the Marne. They'd fought through North Africa, Sicily, Anzio, the liberation of Rome, southern France. Now they faced their bloodiest mission yet, eliminating the Colmar Pocket, the last German stronghold west of the Rhine River. This wasn't supposed to happen. The French First Army was supposed to collapse the pocket weeks ago. Instead, German 19th Army had transformed central Alsace into a fortress 40 miles long and 30 miles deep. Every village a killing ground, every forest a death trap, every river crossing a nightmare. Operation Nordwind, the German counteroffensive in early January, had pushed Allied forces to the breaking point. Now, with the Battle of the Bulge finally winding down, Supreme Commander Eisenhower needed the 3rd Division to finish what the French couldn't. Cross the Ill River, bypass Colmar, cut the railway bridge at Neuf-Brissac. Simple orders, except nothing was simple in Alsace. In January 1945, the 30th Infantry Regiment tried first on January 23rd. They crossed the Ill at La Maison Rouge and pushed toward Riedveer and Holzwihr. German 80mm guns tore them apart. Without armor support, with no cover, unable to dig in, the 30th took catastrophic casualties. 102 men from Company B killed or wounded before reaching their objective, every officer dead. That's when Murphy's 15th Infantry got the call. January 25th, 1945. Company B advanced through the Colmar Forest toward the Bois de Riedveer. Murphy, now commanding after all his superior officers fell, led his men through waist-deep snow. Each soldier carried his M1 rifle, 4 bandoliers of ammunition, 3 fragmentation grenades, 1 white phosphorus grenade, and 1 day of K rations. That's all they had. That's all anybody had. The deeper they pushed into the woods, the more bodies they found. Americans from the 30th, frozen, in the positions where they died. Some torn apart by artillery, others burned beyond recognition. Our armor pulls ahead of us with gun barrels traversing, Murphy would later write. From the woodland comes a crash of shells. 2 of the tanks burst into flames. Their escape hatches open and the still living members of the crew bail out. Blazing like torches and screaming horribly, they roll in the snow. By midnight on January 25th, Company B had reached its position 600 yards into the Bois de Riedveer, north of Holzwihr. Murphy set up his command post near 2 M10 tank destroyers positioned astride a narrow dirt road. Those M10s were Company B's only armor: open-topped turrets, 3-inch main guns, 150 caliber machine guns mounted on the back of each turret, thin armor that couldn't stop an 88mm shell, but they were better than nothing. Murphy called 1st Battalion headquarters for instructions. "Hold your position," they told him. The 2nd Battalion, 30th Regiment, was supposed to arrive as reinforcement, but the 30th was still licking its wounds from the slaughter 3 days earlier. No reinforcements were coming. Murphy was on his own. The men dug in as best they could. Frozen earth broke shovels. Entrenching tools bounced off ground hard as concrete. Murphy's soldiers scraped shallow holes in the snow, more psychological comfort than actual protection. 2 M10 tank destroyers, 40 exhausted infantrymen, miles of open snow-covered fields to their front, dense forest to their rear, a vital road running through their position straight to American headquarters. If the Germans took that road, they'd roll up the entire 3rd Division flank. Murphy knew the math. He'd done it 100 times before. 6 German tanks moving at 15 miles per hour across open ground. Distance 1,000 yards. Time to impact 4 minutes. 4 minutes to call artillery. 4 minutes to position his men. 4 minutes to figure out how 40 Americans could stop 250 Germans backed by armor. The night of January 25th was brutally cold. Siberian conditions, the French commander called it. Men wrapped themselves in every piece of clothing they could find, huddled together for warmth, took shifts on watch because staying awake meant staying alive. Murphy didn't sleep. He paced the tree line, checking positions, counting ammunition, calculating angles of fire, his carbine slung over his shoulder, field telephone never far from reach, 19 years old. Born June 20th, 1925, in a sharecropper's shack in Hunt County, Texas. 7th of 12 children. Father abandoned the family when Audie was 15. Mother died a year later. Murphy dropped out of school in 5th grade to pick cotton, pump gas, hunt rabbits to feed his siblings. The day after Pearl Harbor, he tried to enlist. Marines rejected him. Too young, too small. 5'5" tall, 110 pounds. Baby face that made him look 14. Murphy's older sister signed a false affidavit claiming he was 18. The Army took him. June 30th, 1942. Basic training at Camp Walters, Texas. Advanced infantry training at Fort Meade, Maryland. Shipped to North Africa in February 1943. Assigned to Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. His first taste of combat came at Casablanca, then Sicily, Salerno, the Rapido River, Anzio, Rome, southern France during Operation Dragoon. By January 1945, Murphy had spent 18 months in continuous combat. 2 Silver Stars, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Legion of Merit, 3 Purple Hearts, a battlefield commission from enlisted man to second lieutenant. His Company B had fought across Italy and France. The unit's casualty rate was staggering. Men Murphy trained with were dead. Officers who mentored him were dead. Friends he'd made were dead. Murphy survived because he was smart, ruthless, and refused to accept impossible odds as actual limits. But even Murphy couldn't change math. 6 tanks and 250 infantry against 40 men and 2 M10s wasn't a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. At 13:30 hours on January 26th, German artillery opened up. Shells screamed over the tree line, detonated in the woods behind Murphy's position. Shrapnel tore through branches. Snow exploded upward in dirty fountains. Murphy grabbed his field telephone. Called Battalion Fire Direction Center. Fire mission. Enemy armor and infantry forming up in Holtzwehr. Estimate 6 tanks. Company strength infantry. Coordinates. Another salvo crashed into the forest. The German barrage was preliminary fire, softening up American positions before the assault. Murphy's exec, Lieutenant Walter Weisspfennig, crawled over. "They're coming." Murphy put down the phone, looked through his binoculars. Across the snow-covered fields, German troops poured out of Holtzwehr. White winter camouflage made them nearly invisible against the landscape. But Murphy could see them moving, at least 250 men, maybe more. And behind them, 6 tanks. Not Panthers, not Tigers. These were Jagd Panthers, German tank destroyers, 80-mm guns, sloped armor that could deflect anything the M10s fired. The German force moved in textbook fashion. Tanks spread out in a line. Infantry following in wedge formations. Every few seconds they'd stop, crouch, advance again. Professional soldiers executing a professional assault, range 1,000 yards. Murphy keyed his field telephone. "Fire for effect! Enemy advancing from Holtzwihr toward our position." American artillery responded within seconds. 105mm shells from distant howitzers screamed overhead. Impacted in the fields between Murphy's position and the German force. Explosions erupted. Snow and frozen earth geysered upward. But the German tanks kept coming. 900 yards. Murphy ran to the forward M10 tank destroyer. The crew was already traversing their 3-inch gun. The loader, a corporal from Michigan, looked about 17 years old. "Wait until they're inside 600 yards, Murphy ordered. "Make every shot count." The corporal nodded. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from cold. 800 yards. The German artillery barrage intensified. Shells walked across the tree line. One round detonated near a machine gun position. The explosion threw the gunner 15 feet through the air. He landed in snow, screaming. His left leg was gone below the knee. Murphy's medic, Private William Jackson, sprinted toward the wounded man. Jackson was from Alabama, 22 years old, had been with Company B since Sicily. He'd seen hundreds of casualties, patched up men with their guts hanging out, held dying soldiers while they called for their mothers. Jackson reached the wounded machine gunner, applied a tourniquet, injected morphine, dragged the man toward the aid station in the rear, 700 yards. The two M10 tank destroyers opened fire. The forward M10's 3-inch gun roared. The shell streaked across the snow, hit the lead Jagdpanther square on the glacis plate, bounced off. The German tank didn't even slow down. The rear M10 fired. Another direct hit, another ricochet. "Son of a bitch," someone muttered. 600 yards. Murphy called artillery again. "Walk it closer. Danger close. 400 yards from my position." The artillery officer on the other end hesitated. "Say again? 400 yards? You heard me. Put steel on those tanks or they're going to roll over us." More shells screamed in. Closer now. Much closer. Explosions ripped through the German infantry formations. Murphy saw white-clad bodies flung through the air, saw men diving into the snow, saw others keep advancing, 500 yards. The lead Jagdpanther fired its 8mm gun. The shell hit the forward M10 in dead center, punched through the thin armor. The tank destroyer erupted in flames. Ammunition cooked off inside. The vehicle commander, Staff Sergeant Thomas Brennan from New York, tried to bail out through the turret. He made it halfway before another explosion threw him clear. He hit the ground hard, didn't move. The gunner and loader didn't get out. Murphy watched two of his men burn to death. 400 yards. If you want to see how Murphy survived what happened next, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to show this story to more people who need to hear it. The German infantry was now so close Murphy could see their faces. Young men, old men, teenagers, veterans, all of them advancing with the mechanical precision of men who'd done this 100 times before. 300 yards. The rear M10 was still firing, but its 3-inch gun couldn't penetrate the Jagdpanther's frontal armor. Every round bounced off. The German tanks kept coming. Murphy made his decision. "Fall back!" he shouted. "Everybody back to the secondary positions! Move! Move!" His men didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their wounded, left their dead, sprinted toward the tree line 200 yards behind Murphy's command post. Lieutenant Weisfennig grabbed Murphy's arm. "Come on, we have to go." Murphy shook him off. "Get the men into position. Set up a defensive line. At the trees. I'll call in artillery, then follow you." Weisfennig looked at Murphy like he was insane. "You can't stay here alone?" "Go, now, that's an order." Weisfennig ran. Murphy was alone. The German infantry was 250 yards away now, close enough that Murphy could hear them shouting to each other in German, close enough that their machine guns were starting to chew up the snow around his command post. The remaining M10 was still firing, but it was a matter of time before the Jagdpanthers took it out too. Murphy grabbed his M1 carbine, dropped to one knee, started firing at the advancing Germans. The carbine held 15 rounds. He emptied the magazine in seconds, reloaded, fired again. 2 Germans went down, then 3 more. But there were too many, way too many. Murphy's carbine clicked empty. He was out of ammunition. The German tanks were 200 yards away, and then Murphy saw it. The burning M10 tank destroyer, the forward one that took the 80mm hit. Still burning, ammunition still cooking off inside, black smoke pouring from the turret, but the 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the back of the turret was still intact. Murphy stared at that machine gun. Every tactical manual said never climb on a burning vehicle. The fuel could explode. The ammunition could cook off. The entire thing could detonate and vaporize you. But Murphy didn't have any other options. He sprinted toward the burning M10. Heat washed over him as he got close. The vehicle was an inferno. Flames poured from the turret. Metal glowed red hot. The bodies of the crew were somewhere inside that inferno. Murphy didn't think about it. Couldn't think about it. He climbed onto the rear deck of the burning tank destroyer. The metal was hot enough to burn through his boots. He could feel the heat through his uniform. Smoke choked him, made his eyes water. The 50 caliber machine gun was mounted on a pedestal at the back of the turret. Standard M2 Browning. Belt-fed. Effective range 2,000 yards. Rate of fire 450 to 550 rounds per minute. Murphy grabbed the gun's handles. The metal was hot but not burning. He swung the gun toward the advancing Germans and opened fire. The 50 caliber roared. Heavy machine gun fire at that range was devastating. The 50 caliber round was designed to punch through light armor and concrete. Against human targets, it was catastrophic. Murphy walked his fire across the German infantry formations. Men fell. Entire squads went down. The white-clad Germans scattered, diving for cover that didn't exist in the open snowfield. But the Jagd Panthers kept coming. Murphy swung the gun toward the lead tank. Fired a burst at the vision ports. The tank commander inside ducked. The Jagd Panther swerved slightly. Then it kept advancing. 100 yards. Murphy was standing on a burning vehicle loaded with high explosive ammunition. The Germans could see him now, a lone American standing on a tank destroyer firing a machine gun. They concentrated all their fire on him. Bullets cracked past Murphy's head, smacked into the burning M10. One round hit the turret 6 inches from his hand, sprayed him with metal fragments. Murphy kept firing. The 50 caliber machine gun was a rivalous weapon, reliable, deadly. As long as you fed it ammunition and kept it clean, it would fire all day. Murphy burned through one belt, reloaded with a fresh belt from the ammunition box mounted next to the gun, kept firing. German infantry tried to rush his position. Murphy cut them down at 50 yards. They tried again from a different angle. Murphy swung the gun and hit them with a long burst. Bodies piled up in the snow, but more Germans kept coming. The field telephone on the ground 10 feet away from the burning M10 started ringing. Murphy couldn't answer it and keep firing. But he needed to direct artillery fire or the Germans would swarm his position and kill him. He solved the problem by wedging the telephone receiver between his shoulder and ear while continuing to fire the 50 caliber. "Murphy," he said into the phone. "Lieutenant, this is Fire Direction Center. Give us a correction." "Walk it 50 yards closer, right on top of me if you have to." "Say again?" "You heard me? Put it right on my position. There's Germans everywhere." "Sir, we can't." "Do it, now." 30 seconds later, 105mm shells started landing 50 yards in front of Murphy's position. The explosions tore through the German infantry. Bodies flew through the air. The Germans fell back, trying to escape the artillery barrage. But Murphy wasn't done. He kept firing the 50 caliber, methodical, controlled bursts. 2 seconds on target, traverse. 2 seconds on the next target, traverse. Like he was shooting rabbits back in Texas. Except these rabbits shot back. A German machine gun opened up from 80 yards. Rounds stitched across the burning M10. One bullet hit Murphy in the leg, punched through his calf, exited the other side. Murphy grunted, kept firing. The pain was distant, abstract, like it was happening to someone else. The burning M10 was getting hotter. Flames spread across the deck. Murphy's boots were smoking. The skin on his face felt like it was blistering. He didn't care. The Germans tried one more time. 50 infantry rushed toward Murphy's position, firing from the hip as they ran. Murphy swung the .50 caliber toward them, held down the trigger. The machine gun roared continuously. Brass casings poured from the ejection port. The barrel glowed red hot. 20 Germans went down in the first burst, then 30. The rest broke and ran. Murphy kept firing. The Jagdpanthers, seeing their infantry support shattered, started pulling back. One tank fired a final 80mm round at Murphy. The shell screamed past his head, missing by inches, detonated in the trees behind him. Murphy barely noticed. He was in what soldiers call the zone. That place beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond thought. Pure instinct, pure reaction, kill or be killed, and Murphy had decided a long time ago that he wasn't ready to die. The Germans were retreating. Murphy had held them off. For how long? He had no idea. Time had become meaningless. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. Later, people would tell him it was 60 minutes. A full hour that he stood alone on a burning tank destroyer, fighting off 250 German infantry and 6 tanks. Murphy would barely remember it. What he would remember was the heat, the smoke, the sound of the .50 caliber, the bodies in the snow, the screaming wounded, the smell of burning fuel and burning flesh, and the phone call. At some point during the fight, a voice on the telephone had asked him, "How close are the Germans?" Murphy, still firing the machine gun, had responded, "Hold the phone and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." That story would become legend. But in the moment, Murphy was just trying to stay alive. The .50 caliber finally ran out of ammunition. Murphy looked around for more belts. There weren't any. The ammunition box was empty. The Germans were 300 yards away now, regrouping in Holzwehr. The artillery had stopped falling. The battlefield was suddenly quiet, except for the crackling of the burning M10 and the moans of wounded men. Murphy climbed down from the tank destroyer. His leg gave out, and he fell in the snow. The wound in his calf was bleeding badly. His uniform was burned in places. His face was covered in soot and blood. He grabbed his field telephone, checked to make sure it still worked, called battalion. "Murphy here. Enemy assault repelled. Request immediate reinforcement." "Roger. 1st Battalion is moving up now. Can you hold until they arrive?" Murphy looked across the snowfield, counted bodies, dozens of them, maybe 50 dead Germans, maybe more. Hard to tell with all the artillery craters. "Yeah," Murphy said. "We can hold." He hung up the phone, started limping toward the tree line where his men had taken up defensive positions. Lieutenant Weisfennig and a squad of soldiers met him halfway. They were staring at him like he was a ghost. "Jesus Christ, Lieutenant," Weisfennig said. "We thought you were dead." Murphy shook his head. "Not yet." "You're bleeding." "I noticed." They helped him back to the aid station. Private Jackson, the medic, cut away Murphy's pant leg, cleaned the wound, wrapped it in bandages, gave him a shot of morphine. "You need to be evacuated, sir," Jackson said. "That's a through and through? You're lucky it didn't hit the bone." "I'm not going anywhere," Murphy said. "We need every man we've got." Jackson didn't argue. He'd learned a long time ago that arguing with Murphy was pointless. Within an hour, reinforcements from 1st Battalion arrived, fresh troops who hadn't just spent an hour fighting for their lives. They took up positions in the woods, sent patrols forward to count German casualties and check for survivors. The final tally would shock everyone. Murphy, firing from a burning tank destroyer for approximately 1 hour, had personally killed or wounded an estimated 50 German soldiers. The American artillery he'd directed had killed dozens more. The 6 Jagdpanthers had retreated. The German assault was broken. Company B had suffered casualties, but the line held. The road remained in American hands. The 3rd Division's flank was secure. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 1 hour. It shouldn't have been possible. But Murphy had done it. The next day, January 27th, the 3rd Battalion of the 30th Infantry Regiment captured Holtzwihr. The Germans, demoralized by their failed assault and heavy casualties, pulled back toward the Colmar Canal. The 15th Infantry took Riedwehr on January 26th and continued pushing south. By January 29th, the 30th Infantry reached the Colmar Canal, their original objective. The battle for the northern sector of the Colmar pocket was effectively over. American and French forces would spend the next 2 weeks grinding down German resistance. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. On February 6th, the 3rd Infantry Division reached Neuf-Brisach. The railway bridge was destroyed. The German supply line was cut. By February 9th, the Colmar pocket ceased to exist. The last German forces west of the Rhine in the south were gone. Alsace was liberated. The door to Germany was open. And it had all hinged on one frozen January afternoon when a 19-year-old lieutenant refused to retreat. Murphy's battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Keith Ware, witnessed part of the action. He would later write, "He stood there in the most exposed position imaginable. I expected to see him killed any second. When I saw his tank destroyer begin to burn, I thought he would surely bail out. Instead, he climbed on top of it and began to fire." Private Anthony Abramsky, who watched the entire action from the tree line, wrote, "I expected to see the whole damn tank destroyer blow up under him any minute. It was the greatest display of guts and courage I have ever seen." On June 2, 1945, 3 months after the war in Europe ended, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch presented 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor at a ceremony in France. The citation read, "2nd Lieutenant Audie L. Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to a prepared position in a woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close as 10 yards, only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack, which forced the Germans to withdraw. His directing of artillery fire wiped out many of the enemy. He killed or wounded about 50. Lieutenant Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, and enabled it to hold the woods, which had been the enemy's objective. The Medal of Honor was the highest decoration Murphy would receive, but it was far from the only one. By the end of World War II, Murphy had earned 33 medals and citations, every military combat award for valor available from the United States Army, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V device, 3 Purple Hearts. France awarded him the Legion of Honor and the French Croix de Guerre with Palm. Belgium gave him the Belgian Croix de Guerre with Palm. At 19 years old, Murphy was the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. But the decorations didn't tell the whole story. Murphy had enlisted at 17, spent 400 days in continuous combat. participated in 9 major campaigns across North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany, rose from private to first lieutenant through battlefield commissions, killed approximately 240 enemy soldiers in combat, personally destroyed 6 enemy tanks. He'd seen things no teenager should ever see, done things no human being should ever have to do. And it broke something inside him. Murphy would spend the rest of his life fighting a war that never really ended. After his discharge in September 1945, Murphy returned to Texas as a national hero. 300,000 people turned out for his homecoming parade. Life magazine put him on the cover. Newspapers called him America's greatest soldier. Hollywood came calling. Actor James Cagney saw Murphy's photo on the Life magazine cover and invited him to California, signed him to a contract, got him acting lessons. Murphy's first films were small roles, bit parts, but he had something the camera loved, an intensity, a quiet danger, that baby face hiding something dark and violent. By the 1950s, Murphy was a bona fide movie star. He appeared in more than 40 films, mostly westerns, though he also starred in war movies. His most famous film was To Hell and Back, 1955, based on his autobiography of the same name. Murphy played himself. The film was Universal Pictures' biggest box office hit for 20 years, until Jaws broke the record in 1975. But behind the Hollywood success, Murphy was dying inside. He suffered from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then, they called it battle fatigue or shell shock. Nobody really understood it. Nobody had effective treatments. Murphy had nightmares, violent, vivid nightmares that woke him up screaming. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. Sometimes woke up with the gun in his hand, aiming at shadows. He couldn't stand loud noises. Fireworks sent him diving for cover. Couldn't watch war movies because they triggered flashbacks. He became addicted to prescription sleeping pills. The only way he could sleep without nightmares was to be chemically knocked unconscious. Murphy was open about his struggles. Rare for that era, especially for a man with his reputation as a warrior. He spoke publicly about the psychological cost of combat, advocated for better treatment for veterans with what he called emotional problems. When you go into combat, you leave a part of yourself there, he said in one interview. The part that makes you normal. That part doesn't come back. Murphy married twice. His first marriage to actress Wanda Hendricks lasted 2 years and ended in divorce in 1951. His second marriage to Pamela Archer, a flight attendant, lasted until his death. They had 2 sons, Terry and James. He bred and raced quarter horses, owned ranches in Texas, Arizona, and California, wrote poetry and country music lyrics. 2 of his songs, Shutters and Boards, and When the Wind Blows in Chicago, were recorded by Dean Martin, Porter Wagoner, and Eddie Arnold. Both made the top 10, but Murphy's financial situation was always precarious. He gambled heavily, lost huge sums on horse racing and real estate deals, owed back taxes to the IRS. In 1968, he stated publicly that he'd lost $260,000 in an Algerian oil deal. Despite his money troubles, Murphy refused to do commercials for alcohol or cigarettes. He was aware that children looked up to him and didn't want to influence kids in negative ways. He had a fierce temper, got into fights. In May 1970, he was arrested in Burbank, California, charged with battery and assault with intent to commit murder after allegedly firing a shot at a dog trainer during an argument. The charges were eventually dropped. Murphy also stayed connected to the military. He joined the Texas National Guard in 1950 and served until 1966, eventually reaching the rank of major. He advocated for veterans' benefits, visited VA hospitals, helped other veterans struggling with what Murphy called the invisible wounds. On May 28, 1971, Murphy boarded a twin-engine Aero Commander 680 at DeKalb Peachtree Airport in Atlanta. He was flying to Martinsville, Virginia, for a business meeting. The pilot was Herman Butler, who had more than 8,000 hours of flight experience, but was not rated for instrument flying. Butler had only 6 hours of experience in this specific aircraft type. The weather deteriorated during the flight. Heavy rain, low clouds, zero visibility. At 12:08 p.m., the Aero Commander crashed into Brush Mountain near Roanoke, Virginia, in heavy fog. The aircraft struck the mountainside 400 feet below the summit at high speed. All 6 people aboard were killed instantly. The wreckage burned. Murphy's body wasn't recovered until May 31st, 3 days later. Civil Air Patrol units found the crash site after an extensive search. Audie Murphy was 45 years old. On June 7, 1971, Murphy was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. The ceremony was held near the Memorial Amphitheater. In attendance were George H.W. Bush, then ambassador to the UN, Army Chief of Staff William Westmoreland, and many veterans of the 3rd Infantry Division. Murphy's grave is in Section 46, Site 36611. The headstone is simple, no gold leaf decoration marking his Medal of Honor, per Murphy's request. He wanted his grave to be indistinguishable from any other soldiers. But visitors distinguished it anyway. Murphy's grave became the 2nd most visited site in Arlington National Cemetery after John F. Kennedy's. So many people came to pay respects that the cemetery had to build a special walkway to handle the traffic. A marker was erected at the crash site on Brush Mountain in 1974. Veterans organizations maintain it to this day. Today, nearly every major military installation in the United States has something named after Audie Murphy. The Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, was dedicated in 1973. It provides care to thousands of veterans every year. At Fort Hood, Texas, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment named its headquarters Audie Murphy Hall. The Audie Murphy American Cotton Museum in Greenville, Texas, documents Murphy's life and the history of Hunt County. The National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., displays Murphy's Medal of Honor citation as part of The Price of Freedom, Americans at War exhibition. Every year on June 20th, Murphy's birthday, the state of Texas observes Audie Murphy Day by official proclamation. Murphy's story is still taught at military academies. Infantry officers study his actions at Holtzwihr as an example of leadership under impossible odds. The lesson isn't the tactics, it's the refusal to accept defeat. When asked after the war why he did what he did on January 26, 1945, Murphy gave different answers at different times. Sometimes he said, "I was scared, but I didn't run. I stayed and fought." Other times, bravery is just determination to do a job that you know has to be done. Most often, I just fought to stay alive, like anyone else. Murphy never considered himself a hero. He often said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home, the ones buried in military cemeteries across Europe, the ones who never got medals because they died doing what Murphy survived. "They give you the Medal of Honor for saving lives at the risk of your own," Murphy once said. But there were a lot of guys who didn't get any medals, who didn't survive to get decorated, who did just as much as I did, or more, and nobody ever heard their names. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division suffered 102 casualties out of 120 men in the days before Murphy's stand at Holtzwihr. Only Murphy and a handful of others survived. Staff Sergeant Thomas Brennan, 23 years old, from Brooklyn, New York, died in the 1st M10 when it was hit by German fire. He'd left behind a wife and infant daughter he'd never met. The M10's gunner was Corporal James Henderson, 21, from Michigan. He'd joined Company B at Anzio, fought through Italy and France, survived a dozen battles, died 50 yards from Murphy's command post. The loader was Private Anthony Romano, 19, from Philadelphia. He'd been in combat for 3 months. These men died so Murphy could use their burning tank destroyer as a firing platform. Murphy would carry their names for the rest of his life. That's why stories like this matter. These men left behind patrol reports, radio messages, medal citations, but those documents can't convey what it felt like to stand in frozen mud in Alsace in January 1945, or to climb onto a burning tank destroyer knowing it could explode at any second, or to fire a machine gun for an hour straight while bullets cracked past your head and artillery shells detonated all around you. The official history tells us Audie Murphy held off 250 Germans for an hour and saved his company from destruction. It doesn't tell us about the fear, the exhaustion, the weight of command, the faces of men who didn't come back. It doesn't tell us about the nightmares Murphy would have for the next 26 years, or the loaded pistol under his pillow, or the sleeping pills, or the flashbacks that made him freeze in the middle of conversations, reliving moments from a war that never really ended for him. It doesn't tell us about Staff Sergeant Brennan's wife receiving a telegram that her husband was dead, or his daughter growing up never knowing her father, or the thousands of other families who got similar telegrams in January 1945. War is numbers, casualty figures, after-action reports, strategic objectives achieved or failed. But war is also people, individual human beings making impossible choices in impossible circumstances, doing things they never thought they'd be capable of, surviving things they never thought they'd survive, and being changed, fundamentally and forever, by what they saw and did. Audie Murphy was 19 years old on January 26, 1945. He should have been in college, or working a job, or figuring out who he wanted to be as an adult. Instead, he was standing on a burning tank destroyer in eastern France, fighting for his life and the lives of 40 men who depended on him. He survived that day, survived the war, became famous, made movies, seemed to have it all, but a part of him never left that burning tank destroyer. Never stopped fighting that battle, never came home. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about soldiers who changed warfare, saved lives, refused to quit, real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Philippines, India. Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy and the men of Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. You're helping make that happen.